I just pressed mine momentarily.
It's the push button. Oh, there we go. Okay, great. So it is an inordinately long time. Okay, this is is a special meeting of the Warren Planning Board, Monday, September 12th, 6:30. We have a roll call. We do have a quorum. One excused absence, Jim Lefferts, and the rest of the board is here. There is nothing on the waterfront overlay district development plan review, zoning ordinance 26. There are no public hearings. I'll now call the meeting to order. There is no old business. New business is a discussion of the housing element that would be within the comprehensive plan. Bob is going to lead us in this. We are departing from how we'd handled some of the other elements in this, in that this one is much more complicated. It has greater implications. And so Bob's feeling was that our best bet would be to go over this together rather than have a draft in front of us. And we will not be voting on this tonight, in terms of moving it forward into the comprehensive plan. So Bob, take it away. It's your show.
Sure, Chris. I apologize for not getting this out in advance. Work with me in college in the sense is last minute, very successful grant writing that way. I approach these things. So understand there are some deficiencies doing it that way, because as I thought about it, I finished I realized there's a couple more things I want to add. If you want to walk through it, kind of back up a little bit. My goal is to have the comprehensive plan be fashioned more as a corridor plan, not 400 pages that no one's ever going to read. As long as we are hitting the required objectives and recommendations of the statewide planning in terms of the elements, that it doesn't need to be unnecessarily long. So the two documents I've given you is the draft of the element section, but also what this document is kind of the guidelines that statewide planning says is the information that you should have within that element. And I think we're going to hit 90% of it. Some of it we're not going to hit for reasons I'll explain. But again, I don't think you need long chapter or verse on something that can be made in one sentence. So from my perspective, the goals of housing and affordable housing, I think we all know it is a problem nationwide. It's not unique to Rhode Island. COVID has exacerbated the problem for affordability. We'll talk a little bit about that, but I think the simple goals for what we want to accomplish are to ensure that the community remains a desirable place to live by providing a diverse range of housing opportunities and the types of housing affordability. Secondly, support transit-oriented development and the benefits of form-based code along the Metacom Avenue corridor in order to increase the availability of mixed-income housing, while at the same time supporting all the remaining elements of the town's comprehensive plan. We've talked about this before. Concentrating development of the Metacom corridor preserves that rural character and open space in the twisted area and the northeast section of town. It takes development pressure off the historic district. It helps us address transportation issues. It helps us address housing issues. It helps us address economic development issues. It helps us address resilience issues. So, it's a little bit of struggle for statewide planning to get their arms around what this approach is, but I'm not giving up that this is the approach that we need to take. So again, keeping consistent with the format that they want to see, it's identifying what our policies are, what the implementation action are, the time frame is, and what the priorities. So you see that all of my time frames and priorities, if you've known me for the last 4.5 years, are yesterday. So they're all short term, ongoing. There's only one medium term and then the priorities are 1 and 2. So in some of this, I'm borrowing from the land use element, because again, there's an interrelationship between all the elements of the comprehensive plan and what we're trying to do here. So policy number 1 is to ensure municipal land use and zoning regulations are consistent with the goals and policies set forth within this comprehensive plan and the markets Metacom. So implementation action is adopt text and map zoning ordinance changes to allow for higher density mixed use transit oriented development. Adopt a form-based code for the Metacom project area to permit and incentivize higher density mixed use mixed income housing. Permit high density residential development, mixed use development by right in the Metacom Avenue project area. And establish the corridor as a special revitalization district in order to utilize tax funding. All of those are short-term goals. We can't really move out on any of those until the comprehensive plan is adopted by both the town council and statewide planning, but it doesn't mean that simultaneously we can't be working towards them. I've given all of those a priority at number 1.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
Are there no other areas in town other than the Metacom corridor where affordable housing would be appropriate? I understand Tuissa, but are there no other areas in town?
There are, and we'll talk about that. I mean, I think there are definitely infill opportunities in the 305 census tract. There are, but I mean, in terms of where we could do significant number of housing units that can start to move the dial a little bit, Metacom is really the only area.
Well, I understand, but you want to highlight that there are at least some other alternatives, be it
I don't mind, I
infill?
mean, we can talk about that. I'd like to get through this, but I mean, I think that we do identify those areas. Get a little deeper into the document. And I'm happy to have that conversation. Okay, we just did the second one. Promote and support rehabilitation of existing residential units and conversion of vacant upper level space to residential use in such a tract 305. That's the downtown area, that's Water Street, that's Main Street, that's all the way to Arlington. So to answer your question, yeah, we are identifying those areas. How are we doing that? Had an affordable housing trust fund ordinance on the books for 10 years, which never any money put into that. We have put $250,000 of ARPA money into that now. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund is positioned to give up to $50,000 in grant money that doesn't need to be repaid for the rehabilitation or conversion of deed restricted residential units. Moving forward, and this is the medium term, utilize a portion of the tax increment financing funds to establish a low interest revolving loan fund for the rehabilitation or conversion. Talk about creating housing units, high density along the corridor. I'll editorialize for a nanosecond because I heard saying that they have a plan to create 20,000 units of housing, 2,000 units of affordable housing. You can't do that without doing a capacity study to understand what the available infrastructure is to support that. I can tell you that 20,000 units of housing in any one community would overwhelm a wastewater sanitary water system. I had put in a grant to the infrastructure bank earlier this year to do a capacity study on Metacom. It was a grant program that they only had $1 million, had many applications. And to do this the correct way, it's probably in the $300,000 to $400,000 range. We'll continue to look at funding sources to do that, but I also think that if those don't appear, then there should be some allocation in the next budget cycle to complete that. Any kind of national developer that's going to come in and do the development that we're looking to have happen, the first question they're asking is what's the infrastructure? Is there sufficient wastewater? Is there sufficient water pressure? Is there sufficient supply of gas and electric? So I think it's just necessary that we take that step. That is a short term, but it's still, in my mind, it's a priority. And then obviously, if we're talking about doing transit oriented development, we need to be engaged in RIDOT and built in that conversation. We've got RIDOT to come back looking at doing a look at Metacom being 4-lane roads to 3-lane roads. We have turning lanes that have wider sidewalks that have a bike lane. That's ongoing. Short term, once we get through the zoning changes and comprehensive plan adoption, encouraging RIPTA to increase the frequency of the destination options along the 136 corridor. I talked about regionalism, development of new technology on the island. Right now, the buses that run on the 136 corridor, Kennedy Plaza to Park and say why somebody built Park and Activity at 6 o'clock in the morning, but it seems unfair.
It's that big high-tech plant that's there.
Right.
Can I ask a quick question? What deed restricted residential units are those things that are? What was the?
So in order to even come close to meeting the 10% requirement, that is a state law that every community is supposed to get to with respect to year-round housing. They don't count vacation housing. So there's 39 communities in the state, 6 have met that 10%, one of them being Rock Island. But so that requires a 30-year deed restriction that the property would be for whether that's 120% of area median income
Okay, so
or 80% of area.
So it's for rehabilitation or conversion of into deed restricted.
That's
residential.
correct.
Would that be, okay. That wasn't, it didn't jump out to me that it was the conversion to that. Got it.
So the next section, I mean, and this is, I've listed this, we had this in the land use section element. I think we're going to move it from there to this, because I think, again, it kind of sets the table for the importance of what the market to Metacom plan is, and in terms of what it can create in terms of housing, but also how that plan supports all of the other elements of the comprehensive plan, as I had mentioned earlier. I don't think you have to go through it.
So Bob, I have a question here, if I could.
Yep.
So, when I drive through the Market Street area, I see the houses that are there. There are 700 units. And they're mostly in single family or multifamily housing. How are we going to convince those people, other than the fact that they can't get mortgages or insurance, that they want to move to Metacom? I mean, it's sociologically difficult. I mean, they're a community there, and it's clear that they've been there a long while, and suddenly we're going to say, here's a 5-story building, and the affordable units are on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th floor, and you should, or you have to, give up your house that you've been in for how long? 50 years, 30 years, 40 years, and move to a high-rise building that's, up there. Do you see that as a challenge?
Well, the challenge that I see is that we know by 2035, based on all of the available scientific information,
I get that.
that there are going to be residents that are displaced, that their homes are totally lost.
I get that.
And their choice whether they want to stay in Warren or not, their choice whether they want the town to buy their property out or not. All we're trying to suggest is that all the failures of property buyout programs throughout this country have displaced people that have not had any kind of relocation strategy. If people do not want to stay in Warren, they don't have to. But for those people that are low, moderate income, that are renters, that don't have options, that don't have access to a car, we want to make sure at least we can say there is an option available to you.
But you see the problem, don't you?
Well, I see the problem that if your house is flooded and it's condemned, you can't live there anymore. I see that as a problem.
I mean, I'd say here that the language in this is will provide the opportunity to relocate. It's not a forced relocation.
No, it's not forced relocation.
It's a, here's a place you can go. At some point,
Before the water hits.
I mean, I think this plan, the purpose of this is to say there is another place you could move in town. They could also potentially sell their houses and move to another house somewhere else in Warren. So this is, in essence, I mean, I think it's important that we emphasize the fact that this provides an opportunity to relocate, not we expect everybody who's living along Market and Child to move to Metacom.
Correct.
So I would, I mean, we're not saying that that area is gonna be rezoned or something to the point where people could not, let's suppose somebody, it was the family home forever and ever, and they had plenty of money and they wanted to do whatever construction expense it was to remain there, then they would just incur that expense. I'm of the mindset that like over from here to whatever the time you just said, it's just going to be expensive to have a property. And so people are going to eventually just determine like, I want to sell it and move. Are you
They can
envisioning
sell
that nothing will remain
They
there?
won't be able to sell.
I think, as we've outlined in the Market to Metacom plan, we looked at 4 phases. Geographically, we looked at, what we think the impacts would be in 2035, 2050, 2075, out to 2020.
So Bobby, you want to provide a reference to the more general plan?
I think we
Can
can,
you
I
just,
don't wanna-
let me just finish what you're saying.
Yeah, first of all, I think we need to step back and recognize that holistically, we're talking about the Market Metacom plan and every element of the comprehensive plan, and that would be the executive summary. So let's
Yeah. right,
assume
right,
that everybody knows what we're talking about. So by 2035, we know of a high sense of probability that we are going to lose some properties that will no longer be able to be mortgaged or insured.
For that matter, the road may not be passable.
So- Presumably, it's going to be very difficult to sustain that portion of the Market Street area between Belcher's Cove and Child Street. Maybe not go all the way to Child Street, but there are definitely going to be homes that are impacted.
This is also an incremental process. I mean, I
So
think
we've
that
looked
that,
at, one of the things that we've done this year is that we've engaged law students from Roger Williams to look at what legal rights do we have with respect to takings. Is life safety a reason for us to take a property? How do we come up with a value that is a pre-disaster value for somebody for their property? We don't want anyone to be adversely impacted. So I wanted to look at what the legal responsibilities of utilities were, utility companies to remove their infrastructure. Our best hope to avoid phase 2, 3, and 4 is how much we can do in phase 1 in terms of coastal adaptation and water storage. There is no way that those houses immediately along Belcher's Cove are ever not going to be underwater. Now, somebody could take the initiative and say, I want to flood-proof my home. We see this happening now, is that there's a lot of intergenerational homeownership in this area, and every 2 months we get a young family that came in and said, my grandmother gave me this home, we want to make improvements to the home. If the improvements to that structure exceed more than 50% of what the value of the improvements, not the land, they need to elevate that to 13 feet above sea level. Not easy at all, and not cheap. So, this is something that, again, as we've gone through this process, we know that 50% of the properties in this area are not owner occupied. Half of that 50% are not people from within the state. So, I don't fear that, if that flooding happened, that people say, okay, watch
You just
your
walk
hands,
away from it.
good luck, here you go. So now the town has the environmental cleanup responsibility. We're in many lawsuits chasing people. All we're trying to do with this plan is raise awareness that this is a problem. If we do nothing, this is what's going to happen, and you'll criticize us because we didn't do anything. But by being proactive, we're also being criticized because we're presumably scaring the hell out of people, which is not what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is explore all of the potential minefields that are out there, both good and bad. But reasonable expectation is that if in fact we're at 7 feet above sea level average, and that area is not 7 feet above sea level, and NOAA predictions conservatively are we're going to be 9 feet above sea level by 2200. sit back and, let's say.
Those are the worst case scenarios.
Well, those
Yeah.
are scenarios that
They-
are being updated on a regular basis.
I know, but if you go on their website and you ask them, what is 100 years? 3 feet. It's not 8 feet. That's like if the world decides that there isn't a problem and we do nothing.
The
It's,
the thing with sea level rise is, it's not.
no, and
sea level-
I'm not,
But sea level rise is a problem in and of itself.
right, I agree with
Storm
that.
surge
It's
is
another
the issue.
whole-
Storm surge, 6 inches of sea level rise with storm surge could be 5 feet of water coming into the inland area. Storm surge is the cold.
Right,
That's
no,
that's where the flooding damage comes. Sea level rise is a measurable thing. It's storm surge that is the problem.
Right, I agree, and I just, my whole thing is that I don't want to expose the town into a situation where the town takes such a strong position that you almost, I don't know the proper term, but you sort of disparage property to where it preemptively decreases the value, and then people are frustrated,
That's
you
the
know.
double-edged sword. I mean,
I mean,
there's-
insurance companies have already done that. Let's be
No,
honest, some of these
but
homes,
I'm
I'm not
okay with the
even sure,
insurance
yeah.
companies doing it,
I'm
you
not
know?
even sure how some of these homes are not, I mean,
I
I've talked
agree,
to
I
people
agree.
who've looked
I
at
mean, I
houses and
understand.
it's $17,000 a year to insure their houses, so they don't buy it. And so these homes, what's gonna happen is, now this might not happen, but the next generation, if they try to sell, someone's gonna be like, I mean, it's more than a mortgage here. And so I think with this plan, we don't, kind of have to think of the town in itself and preserving the town and not so much people, because people are gonna come and go, but we still want the same amount of housing units. Worst case scenario, for a period of time, we have more housing units, which just increases the amount of taxable property that we're not getting right now, lowering our tax burden and being able to reinvest in other things. And so whether it is helping these homes elevate or other, and something like that. So I think it's almost like this, like more of a blanket to ensure that we're preserving Warren for many centuries to come and not just.
Right, and I like that plan a lot. The nature of my question, and perhaps it's sidetracking from what we're discussing, is more along the lines of what happens if, like, 50% of the anticipated, consequence takes place and people migrate, and then we have these islands in the stream of these people that are like the hard people that have, like, barricaded their, what do we
Well, I
do
mean,
in that
that's-
situation?
that's, a couple of responses to that. I mean, that's something that we looked at, what rights do we have to take properties if you have a holdout? And this has been a problem with property buyouts in other areas. You got the one guy at the end of the street that said, well, you need me, so my number is gonna be artificially high.
Right, right.
At some point, it doesn't make sense for us to provide services. It doesn't make sense to maintain utility to that house. And what legal rights do we have in order to say that we're not going to do that anymore, but we're not having any hard feelings. We're still going to offer you the same compensation we would have offered you if we had done this willingly. It's a difficult conversation to have, but I think as we get a little deeper into this, we need to have this conversation in the context of what types of issues we have with housing right now, and how are those problems going to either get worse or better? Because we have a housing crisis now, and if we lose houses down in this area and we don't have a plan to replace those houses, whether people that are there now or somewhere else, that we're really being irresponsible.
So Bob, you don't want to deal with the buyout issue here, obviously.
I mean, we're not, we're talking about it, but.
Yeah, but I'm
we're not
saying in this
making-
document, in the policies and procedures, and even in the text of,
It is in the text that is something, but we're not like starting next week.
no,
or
I
next
understand
year.
that, but I'm saying,
We're definitely, it's in this narrative that,
And just
Property buyouts
future
are future.
steps of possible, right, I get you.
I mean, because, if you, like back on presentations we've done, on the market tonight comp plan, if we do nothing, the loss of revenue, property tax revenue, business revenue, to the town would bankrupt us. So we can take a position, well, it's not gonna happen in my lifetime, I'm not gonna worry about it.
But you don't have to sell us on it, Bob. I mean, we're sold. So I have one other question. When you don't reference, you talk about market to Medicom, but eventually this idea of form-based code, et cetera, will extend to Market Street. Is that correct?
Possibly, I mean, the problem.
Or do we want to incorporate in the plan
I
that,
don't know, I mean, because, I mean, Market Street, you know, this is a 10-year plan. And, you know, are we gonna get to Market Street, you're talking Market Street to the Mass Line?
Yeah.
I mean, are we gonna get to that in the next 10 years? I don't think so. And there are infrastructure challenges there, and, you know, there is I think when we talk about zoning, you know, we'll talk about the rural business district is ridiculous, and we need to change that.
I got
But
that.
I don't see that to be the short-term, you know, solutions to what we're trying to accomplish.
But it is part of the strategy in the
It is
long
part of the
term.
strategy, but I mean, you know, Market Street, as you know, because the land trust has property there. I mean, Market Street is good for from Market Street to about 50 feet in on most of these sites because it's flat. And I mean, there are limitations to what can happen. I mean, I think, you know, the short-term focus in where we have the greatest opportunity to do the greatest good is not that.
My brain's been going in a direction in the last few minutes. When you are outlining the increased density in these areas, which will help address the housing crisis that is here today, not withstanding sea level rise. Even if something crazy happened and sea level rise stopped and this was implemented, it would still be an incredible net plus for the town because you increase the housing. I mean, right? I mean, this is a good idea whether sea level rise happens or
Yeah.
not, right?
It's a great idea.
So I mean, it's
If you know Jesus Christ, you can make.
You said
anything
model
stop. That'll be great. You like
But-
money?
Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
like it's
Well, that's the whole idea about, you know, again, I mean, I don't have any false expectation that everyone that is displaced from the Market Street area is gonna go to Medicom. You know, I would venture to guess less than 50% of those people would do that. I hope more would, but, you know, it's also creating an opportunity on Medicom for, again, transit-oriented development. So if there's MBTA transit station being built in Fall River, you know, we become a bedroom community for people that occasionally go into Boston on the train. We create opportunities for seniors that are aging in place in single-family homes now to create housing for them on this corridor that frees up family housing in other areas of town. I mean, it would be irresponsible for us to talk about Market Street being impacted and not offer an alternative for the current residents there. There's no obligation for them to take advantage of that. I mean, those people that are absentee landlords are gonna take the money and run. They don't care about their tenants. But I care about the tenants because those are people that work in the restaurants or schools. And I can't guarantee, I can't make them stay here. I mean, I think as we finalize the form-based code, you know, we're not gonna say that they have to live on the 5th floor. I mean, we wanna make sure that's integrated. But we have to, in my opinion, and you don't have to agree with me, I mean, you're the final say on this. I think we have to acknowledge that we have a, at least in my mind, responsibility to think forward and address how we have a strategy for those people that are low moderate income, for those people that are displaced, and then what do we want this community to be? And you know, what can we create with that blank canvas that is Market Street now?
Yeah.
A lot of what we're gonna create on Market Street is for people that aren't even here now, right? That people that we want to attract.
I guess I was just trying to make it, what's laid out from what I'm reading is it's not, one of the things it addresses is sea level rise, but it's not prerequisite on those other people that you say aren't even here. You know, I forget what the term was in the last. It's expanding in a way that,
I mean, again, it ties back to what I said previously. We don't have the ability, there's lots of undeveloped land, it's beautiful.
Hey,
Beautiful. Fred in Mass, you have no town, we can't get 500 condos. Loves the idea of 500 condos. Because we don't have water and sewer. I mean, it's just not gonna happen. We can't get water to the people that are there now. And we can't get, so I mean, there are certain realities that we have to deal with. And I mean, I'm trying to deal with the realities that we have. At the same time, we don't have large lots of land in the downtown area that we can do any kind of development. We're doing some infill projects now, but they're great, but they're not super great. But, you know, Medicom just physically and from your eye is, why wouldn't you do something? That's the unique opportunity. The fact that we can be politically correct and say we're going to address, whether it's affordable housing, workforce housing, I'm fixated on mixed income housing now because I think that's more palatable. Why wouldn't we do that there?
This is tangential, so you can move on, but I'm just curious. I know that in the past, we've had the reports over here when they did the good work on sea level rise, they were talking about the displacement and the damage, and it was focused on sea level rise. Has there been work done on just that mixed income housing and the benefit to the tax base of the town, independent of sea level rise? Like if that were not accounted in, just the increase in housing units, you follow what I'm saying?
The fiscal impact analysis.
Or
I mean, I don't
benefit-
think we
benefit
can do
analysis.
anything without acknowledging sea level rise. I mean, I think it's a reality.
I guess what anyway.
I mean,
People have all sorts of feelings about it, so it's I guess the and then I'll hit the mute button. I get back to my
You hit the wrong mute button.
how do we compellingly tell the story that this is a good idea, regardless of what reality of sea level rise is impact?
Wait until the first house.
In terms of the comprehensive plan, I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea. This is, you know, unfortunately, if you read through all of the requirements that they want to see here, most of them are just ridiculous. I mean, what does it matter what salaries were 10 years ago? We're dealing with reality now. We're dealing with what the reality is coming out of COVID. We're dealing with the reality that home prices in the last 2 years have increased almost 60% or more in this town, in a town that was always recognized to be kind of, okay, if you can't live in Bristol, Barrington, you live in Warren. I mean, so I mean, those are the current realities. I mean, my frustration with statewide planning is, I mean, I'm trying to hit these things. I'm hitting them in one sentence because they're ridiculous.
Bob, I'd like to discuss two areas. I mean, we've done this Medicom to market to Medicom. You know, I think we're down on that. I hope, yes, no. But the 10% affordable housing, I would like to strongly note that that is a ridiculous and unachievable goal in the comprehensive plan.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't see that in
It is,
this.
if you look at if you go ahead to, let me just, let's stop here for a second. In the future housing section, I make a statement that it is mathematically impossible.
Where's that?
It's in the back, but let's just, I mean, I
When
think,
we let Bob, we sort of beat this.
Well,
one.
I mean, there's two things I want to talk about here. You know, that's one of them. And the other is the Airbnb, which I know that the town council is working on. But if we're talking about affordable housing, existing housing stock, that's a serious threat.
so what I'm trying to do with how we've put this element together is work through this list from statewide planning. So, I mean, you know, show us this, show us this, show us this. I'm trying to do that. You know, it's in terms of, you know, what housing costs are, what the increasing median home price is. I mean, we're doing all of those things, showing, you know, how many people we have at risk. I made a statement in the you know, looking at the age, I mean, they have some ridiculous requirements here, so some of these slides are only so we can check the box of what they have on their checklist of things you need to address. If we go to the future housing, first paragraph, I talk about the fact that mathematically, we will never, ever, ever hit the 10% unless we said any new housing in Warren, in the limited area that we have to do housing, is all affordable housing. We know historically that that is a failed program.
Bob, can
Yeah,
we,
yeah.
I acknowledge that. What I'm thinking is, can we put it up further? Because it's buried here to some degree.
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, I think, the affordable housing issue is critical to this process. And I think it's as important for us to make this point up front.
Well, I think what we could do is we could have either in the front or in the conclusion, a page that are the bullet points. Here's what we can accomplish. Here's what we're never going to accomplish
Relative to this document.
relative to that.
So it has a table that says, when it gets to 10%, it says red and it says mathematically impossible.
Well, I mean, I think, if we want to say that, and it's, I don't know if you folks are aware of this, but some guy at statewide planning just pulled that 10% out of the sky. There was no thought that went into it, and yet the legislature continues to promote it, and
They do
even
it.
our own
They talk about where
representatives.
you're going to be in 20 years. We're going to be backwards.
And the other part is the Airbnb thing, which is what the town council is looking at. I mean,
I
that,
have a paragraph in here on short-term rentals, how it impacts us. And that's in the future housing section as well. That's one of the.
and again, I think those are things that need to be, because to me, it's like, there is Metacom is essential to this program, as is protecting our existing affordable housing and being reasonable about what constitutes affordable housing. So that those three, to me, are really important to in terms of, a lot of folks don't read through stuff, and there's 2 points for this comprehensive plan. One, we're trying to please the people at statewide planning who, are the gave birth to this 10% thing. But more importantly to me, it's for the people of Warren who are going to look at this and say, what did the planning board do? What are their concerns? And that's why I'd like it up front that, we have within a goal is to ensure that what housing there is that's affordable, rentals, are maintained and are not whittled away either by things like short-term rentals. And also that when we're talking about affordable housing, we're not being pushed into a corner, where we're approving a condo development on Main Street with $300,000 units that are considered affordable. I mean, to me, I can't get my head around that.
As an example, if we don't take into consideration that project, right now, those units aren't online. So we are at 4.23% of meeting the 10% goal. That puts us about middle of the pack for all the communities that have it. When those 14 units come online, 4 will be affordable. Great. 10 will not. So
The
we
number
will go
goes
from
down.
4.23 to 4.03.
Jesus.
It's ridiculous. I mean, why do people,
Because you add
the
the
legislature,
denominator
and the
as
leadership
minimum.
don't understand what a failed equation that is?
Right.
I mean, if you get more units, the numbers start to improve. I just hypothetically have a section in here that if we did 700 units on Metacom and 25% of them were affordable, all that gets you is up to like 6%. You're never gonna get to 10%.
Right, and I think that needs, I mean, we're, nobody else seems to be doing it, so our comprehensive plan should be the one that says the emperor has no clothes.
I agree.
And I feel very strongly, and particularly when we have our members who are representatives, Representative Warren, who are not yet on board, clearly with a flawed concept. I think it's important that somebody, and you have led the charge on this, but I think the planning board through the comprehensive plan needs to make this a very strong part of our goal. We want to create affordable housing, but we want to do it realistically and not through some artificial concept that one guy pulled out of the air.
What scares me the most is that the median income in Warren is $55,000 plus. That if you're at $50,000 plus, according to HUD, you are considered low income. That's a whisper away, and that people aren't nervous about that is problematic. That we have people that, and education is a large part of it. There's people that own their own home that are in those income levels, but because they own their own home and they've been in it for 30, 40 years, it's not impacting them. But that prevents anybody from trying to move into town to be able to, when the median home price in Warren over the last 5 years has increased almost 70%. It's really difficult to attract people that you want in your community. I talk about police officers, teachers, people that are important to a community being a community. So this is not a Warren problem, but I appreciate what you're saying, Fred, and I agree with you that we need to get past the focus on the 10%. And let's focus on what are we going to do when the state says they have $250,000 that they're going to invest in affordable housing across the entire state.
No,
That's
250 million, isn't it?
250 million, right?
You said
That's
thousand.
laughable. I mean, to do the 17 units on Water Street is a $20 million project. And the gentleman has already bought the land. So, I mean, just, can you do 10 of those? That's not getting you 2,000 units of housing. That's not getting you 20,000 units of housing. So as you said, and I use it too, it's the emperor's new clothes. I want this statement to be bold. That
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I mean, it's good, it's in there, and it's well reasoned. And I think we have to hit it so that people, when they come in finally to look at this comprehensive plan, say, hey, wait a minute, the planning board said, this doesn't make sense. I want it to roil the waters. I want media in here covering this. I mean, if nobody else has the strength of
the
character.
medium part is coming, trust me.
Yeah,
They're coming.
well, I mean, again, I think, but within, and I think it gives a greater credence to market to Medicom, because it is.
So, Bob,
As you've
maybe you
seen
need to
here,
beef
even
up the
when,
introduction.
Mike, I'm talking still here. As you've seen within, this group, market to Medicom is still, it's hard for people to get their minds around.
Yes.
So I think, by adding this other stuff that is much more, it's much easier to grasp, I think it will lift Medicom as
And I
well.
absolutely agree. And I mean, and there are a lot of reasons, A, I didn't have done with B. I had that under circulated, I didn't want to get this out in advance. This is, in the next 2 weeks, this is the feedback that I want.
Right.
Because I want to piss everyone else off in the state that, we're going to call it out that, these state programs are failed and they're going to continue to fail. And there are ways, the zoning changes, form-based code, that's how you address this problem, not just in Warren, but everywhere else, where it makes sense. I mean, those areas that don't have infrastructure, they're never going to be able to address this. It's never going to happen. So why would you put that burden on them? I mean, it's unfair. And there's not a developer in the world that's going to say, yeah, I'm going to invest all this money in this on-site wastewater treatment system, and I'm gonna have to do like subsidized housing? I don't think
I
so.
know.
Could we come up with this is a outside the box maybe, but sounds like there's universal panning and agreement that the equation is the emperor has no clothes. Could we come up with a different equation that we put forward in this?
There is no equation. I mean, I think that, I'll say something. I mean, the problem is that, the state is looking at deed restricted units. They're not looking at section 8 units, which we have few because people don't want to do the responsible thing and make sure they're lead safe and have all the, CO2 and fire protection. But just a census of what rents are in the community. So, another problem is that Rhode Island Housing sets these subsidies for, so you're gonna get a comprehensive permit application. You have to make sure that the rents are 80% of area median income. My area median income in this area is over $90,000 because that whole MSA is like including Barrington and Providence and east side of Providence. So you could be making $69,000 a year and get a subsidized mortgage. There's no one addressing those people that are 20, 30% of affordable housing. And I'm not advocating for that or not, but I mean, the system is so skewed in terms of what the formula is. Rhode Island Housing says you can get subsidized mortgage for a for sale unit if you make 120% of affordable housing. That means if you made $136,000 a year, either single or family, you would qualify technically for an affordable housing unit. I can tell you as the governor of the state of Warren, I do not make that much money. I never will.
So Bob, if I'm just thinking about to sort of like add in my 2 points on this paragraph here. I want to make a dramatic statement. It's a nice example about this hypothetical 700 that means something and that makes me visualize just what kind of problem we're dealing with. But if we want to add another sentence, if somebody wants to do the calculation, I'm just going to do a rough calculation in my head here out loud. Somebody tell me if I'm on the wrong track. We've got 5,363 total homes, correct?
Yep.
Okay, 5,363. Of those, 213 are identified as long-term affordable, correct?
Correct.
All right, so to get to 10%, if we add no homes, we need 536 homes to be affordable.
That's
We've
correct.
got 213, so we need 263 plus another 80, what is that, 340 homes of the existing stock will need to be converted to affordable housing. All right, so going with that, we can then come up with a ratio for every new home that's added to Warren. Something like 1.75 homes need to be affordable, right? So that number needs to be identified and put into the sentence.
Yeah.
And that will mean something.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's almost 2 to 1. That's crazy.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's a great point. I like it.
Great point.
Let's go for it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think,
And that, which is never gonna happen. Like more than more affordable homes have to be built than unaffordable homes, as I like to call them, to overcome this number.
Yeah.
well, we issued 13 building permits last year, all for single family homes.
Yeah, all really expensive ones over on the, east side that cost $1 million.
Well, we have some here, I mean, but again, I mean, it's.
Which is great. I like those kind of homes. Don't
You're
get me
never
wrong.
gonna meet, you're
Right.
never going to get to that number,
Correct.
ever.
So
But
I would suggest that what you do is you maybe leave the detail here in the future housing, but you beef up the introduction to show the objection to the 10% standard and use whatever math you want to make it as effective as possible, but get it to the front, which responds to
And I
Fred's
think it should
point.
be in both places, actually.
yeah, no, I think it hit them twice.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but that number mean that we need a straightforward number. This
Right.
many homes need to be built that are affordable for every unaffordable house. Period.
Yeah, no, I like that. And it's the simpler the better
Yes.
in terms of,
Exactly.
will vote for me, it's a vote for us.
Now, 213 homes identified as long-term affordable. How many of those, do we have any idea, have been pulled off the market?
So to qualify that, about 140, 150 of those are Kingsmead Village elderly housing. The other big aspect of that is group housing. So for people that are
Oh.
mentally or physically impaired, we have very few affordable housing projects that have, 6 or 7 units. And I will say candidly that of those that we have HUD violations associated with all of them.
Well, here's a long-term affordable as defined by the town, but I mean, part of or the state rather, there are a lot of apartments in downtown Warren.
Yep.
They're not necessarily considered affordable because they're not registered as
They're not
affordable,
deed restricted.
but those are affordable rentals.
This is the argument statewide is why aren't we doing a census of what rents are and say, okay, we have hypothetically 1,000 units of available rental units in downtown. And 60% of those fall within what would be 80%. So 1,550 for 1 bedroom, 1,650 for a 2 bedroom based on Rhode Island housing. So every community would be in excess of the 10%.
Well, would we be able to get that information?
No, because, I think that's one of the things that we're saying here is that we don't have reliable information in terms of, Brett has a multifamily. I can't ask him, what are you charging? He's not required to report what
Hey,
he's
how much are you
charging.
charging?
But I don't need to pick on him.
No, but that's right, because, if you knew that data, you could provide a better picture of what it costs to live in the city,
Correct.
in the town. And,
So we don't have that.
Could we extrapolate?
It's impossible because right now, the market is driving everything. We've got, I don't know on Davis and Bowen Street what people charge for rent because, those are not meeting any of the standards of affordable housing in terms of safe, decent, affordable. The only standard they meet are affordable, because I doubt they're safe and decent, because, you're not gonna pass a credit check, you're gonna pay me every week in cash. Those are, those get lost in this whole, wish list that we wanna do the right thing.
Is there any way that we could at least have a gross figure of the number of multifamily homes?
Yeah, we definitely have.
Because that would be somewhat helpful, because you could say, we have X number of multifamily homes within the downtown, the greater downtown
What
area.
skews us right now is 99 Water Street in Thurston. None of those are. That's gonna technically take us out of the low moderate income census tract because of what the demographic is
Right.
in that area. The assessor and I today were looking at, the formulas we use when we identify properties for calculating what the sewer use fees are going to be. So we know, what are single family, what are multifamily, what are mixed use. But in terms of any kind of census on what they're charging for rents, we don't have any of that.
Right, but I think at least we can say there are X number of multifamilies houses, which, are generally within market rates, not.
I don't know that I can say that. I had
Fine.
the social services director, come to me last week and say that somebody was on the 3rd floor of an apartment on Aspen Street, and the landlord just said, your rent was $1,200, now it's going to be $2,200. It's because they're rolling the dice that, we've done a lot of great things in Warren. It's an attractive place to be. People are, coming from another area like, hey, $2,200 doesn't sound so bad to me. It's,
Okay. No, looking for an easier out, but.
no, I want an easy out, but what I want to do with this is, shake people in the legislature to say, get your shit together, because you're not solving the problem. You're not even coming, you're creating the problem.
Exactly.
Well, the one thing, you know, in terms of that, would be how many multifamilies. Now, if somebody wants to do short-term rentals in Warren, do they have to register for that?
You don't have an ordinance on it yet. If they're registering with Airbnb or Vrbo, I mean, they're supposed to. But that's the wild, wild west, right?
Shouldn't that be part of our comprehensive
I mean, I
plan?
have a small paragraph in there on the future housing on short-term rentals. But I mean, again,
Right.
based on what we can see from Vrbo and some of the other, you know, legitimate sites, we have 26 units. I know there's more than that, but I can go on Zillow and see that there's a property on the corner of Mill Street that is booked out through the end of the year at $2,200 a week. A week, 4 units. Right, I think it's in your neighborhood.
Yeah,
You know what it is.
corner, Kelly.
Yeah, Kelly Street.
Yeah,
sorry. And, I mean,
Corner Kelly and me.
Well, I mean, you know, to me, that's not just may cause pressures on rental, are already causing pressures and will only increase.
but the issue with that is that, you know, the state is very unclear in terms of what their interpretation of this is. Newport, you know, was seeing this more than anyone else, trying to be very aggressive in terms of what their enforcement and requirements are going to be. They're getting pushed back in court. I mean, you know, the state is nebulous in terms of how they want to jump into this, you know, in terms of promulgating anything at the state level, in terms of how short-term rentals should be regulated.
Well, again, though, I mean, you know, maybe we lead the way. I mean, the president of the town council, John Hanley, made it very clear that he believes that short-term rentals should be only allowed with owner-occupied buildings. I mean, you know, to me, that's what an Airbnb is. When I first started using those things, you'd go in, you'd meet the people, you'd have breakfast with them sometimes or not. Now it's a hotel. And I think, you know, it's time for somebody to stand up. So if we're going to stand up with the 10%, I think we should also stand up with the Airbnb, because this is, you know, it's insane what could happen to this town. It's a great little town. What you're saying, Asselin Street, somebody's going to charge $220 from $1,200. You know, this is the surge. You know, it's not water, but it's an economic surge that could take out a lot of people in Warren, which makes, you know, this eclectic community that we have could be destroyed unless we're willing to take a strong stand and say, no, this is, you got a short-term rental, you got to live there. You don't just rent these things out willy-nilly, live
We've
in.
got, you know, an ordinance going forward on that. I think for purposes of this document, we taking the position that, you know, supporting the town, adopting a short-term rental ordinance is the appropriate language, but we're not going to dictate in this document.
No, I know we're not. And it's like zoning. We're going to have to change zoning, but that's not, we can't dictate that. You know, we've got to actually make the zoning changes after this document comes out. By the same token, I'd like to see stronger language about
We
this.
can, I mean, just as we were doing on Metacom, you know, we're addressing, you can't make a zone change like drastically without it being part of the comprehensive plan. So we're doing that. That's what we're doing on Metacom, like being able to adopt form-based.
Right.
We can make a statement in certain areas that we want to make a zone change for those areas that,
That's all I'm asking for.
I mean, I think that's totally appropriate.
Yeah. And again, upfront. So it's, you
So
know,
that's in the policy and implementation phase, is that where you see it?
either that or goals. I mean, it's, you know, it,
I think you'd be more specific in the policy.
yeah, I agree. I think you're right, Mike. I mean, I'd see it diverse
You have
range.
both, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to, because ensure that the community remains a desirable place to live by providing a diverse range of housing opportunities in the types of housing and affordability. Defending, I mean, making a statement within the goal that we're defending the existing residents and the character of the town,
I mean, I would add it as a goal
and as policy as
as
well.
policy.
Okay,
I
great.
mean, I think that's the most.
Hey, that's the feedback. I mean,
I mean, but I'll yield to you all.
no, but again, I think that's, I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't know, there needs to be some legal research done on the ability to regulate I'm sure other municipalities have already
And
enacted.
this is the gray area.
Right,
This
it
being
is,
challenged
but-
all over
but-
the country.
Speaking generally, right, what are some of the distinctions, right? Well, short-term housing is not for residents of the town, right? This is for tourists. So that right there is a factor, I think, when we're trying to decide, is this house a business that should be regulated? Okay, or, an owner's right to do what he wants with his property, right? And there's a weighing of the interests on each side. When you have, what would otherwise be residential homes excluded from, the housing stock, for potential residents to use. And it's used exclusively for tourists, right? Well, now we're looking like a hotel. And I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with that, and making people register, call it a commercial property.
Which opens another, I mean.
Yeah.
these
Houses
are things
become
we're
tangible
looking at,
property.
is that,
Right.
We have
Mhm.
zoning ordinance that says, use requirements. Is a bed and breakfast allowed?
Right.
Or is an Airbnb different than a bed and breakfast? If this is a more of a hotel situation, what are the building code requirements? What are the fire code requirements?
yeah,
What are the occupancy requirements?
Right. Parking,
We
everything.
know, what are the parking
Right.
requirements? We know that an Airbnb is not being rented, for the most part, by 2.5 people.
Look at, make them put in sprinklers. Nobody will turn it into
Well,
an
I mean,
Airbnb. you know?
These are all the things that we're trying to look at as we're drafting this ordinance, because, those communities like Newport and other areas of the country that have said, taken this draconian approach to, like, we're gonna stop this, they're getting sued in state court and federal court in terms of the property rights. These are my legal rights, but, so, we're trying to pull back a little bit and say, okay, what do we typically allow? And what are you really? Are you registered? Do you have a tax ID number? So there are other ways to address this, but I think the building code and fire code are the best ways to address this, because it's a public safety issue.
Yeah, and I mean, why not also look at where would we allow a literal hotel, right? And how did we come to that decision? How does a hotel get zoned into what particular area? If a hotel wanted to open up, right? Let's apply the same standard to a hotel, what we think of as a hotel, to an Airbnb.
Absolutely.
And then you're not violating anybody's right to do what they want with their building. It's you just, if you act like a hotel, you get to be regulated like a hotel. Otherwise, hotel owners will be suing.
File that only is going to represent town in legal action.
well, again, I think that we have an opportunity here to say something strong, very strongly, that does not necessarily put us in the crosshairs of a lawsuit. This is a good place for a statement that helps set the stage. And that's, I think what we can do. I mean, you can't do anything you want to with your land. You can't raise llamas in your backyard. This facetious concept that some people ascribe to, it's my land, I'll do what I want with it. I mean, where is that
Yeah.
said in the Constitution or any other document?
This is the
Nowhere.
opportunity to do this, and you can kind of subtly a way to get to where you want to go, because assuming, this is gonna go to town council, hopefully they approve it, but when in the future, if the council adopts the short-term, rental, these are the steps you have to go through. When a property owner comes forward to the zoning board or the planning board, and you have to have findings of fact, it's not consistent with what we have in the comprehensive plan, you can't approve it.
Right.
I mean, and that's kind of the back door for tax.
Yeah.
And in terms of why you do this. You know, this document is going to lead us to the water. Hopefully there's a line there.
And the storm surge hasn't come in yet. Okay, well, I mean, again, I think it feels a little soft at the front. So if we beef up the goals and we beef up the policy, I think that puts it, and we get another shot at it before we approve it for the comprehensive
I
plan.
mean, the rest of, we don't have to go through this, like, some of this is from what I did for the town council. I mean, again, I'm trying to hit the bullet points that the state says you hit. So what's the age of the housing? What's the type of the housing? We're hitting all that. I mean, and that's like meaningless to me. I think this conversation is a more powerful conversation. It's like, Houston, we have a problem. Are we gonna fix it or are we gonna leave you out there? I don't want to be in a start a situation that this is standard time.
One thing that Mike had mentioned earlier, are there some specific areas that we could note? I remember Andrea looked around at some of the places in town where you could potentially put, low to moderate income.
I mean, she did look at parcels, but it's difficult. Some of the parcels, for the most part, she identified were either in manufacturing or business. And now you get into kind of a spot zoning situation. We can make a recommendation that the town look at that, but I wouldn't specifically call out any of those parcels.
Okay.
So like on Cutler Street, you have an undeveloped piece of property that should be housed, next to an auto body shop and some other things. Is that
Probably.
really the appropriate place to put housing? What type of housing would that be? I think, now, I think we can have a general statement that there should be some look at the inventory, but I think we should look now at where we have opportunity.
Yeah, again, Mike's question was valid, and I think, other people would ask that question. Are there other areas in town that could conceivably be used as infill? And I know, we don't want to create spot zoning. On the other hand, spot zoning in the past was a dirty word because it was used to allow somebody to do something that was completely inappropriate in an area.
Well, the infill housing, I think infill housing is the greatest opportunity. And that's like surprising to me that we need to address. This is the NIMBY piece, because the only place you really can do infill development is in the 305 Census Tract downtown. And both projects that we've had, one approved, one coming for you, people are like, well, that's a good idea, I just don't want it here. And well, guess what? This is state law. So that's the shield we can march behind.
But you don't like that shield.
I like the shield because it gets us development where we need development, but it doesn't get us any closer to the goal.
Yeah.
The Water Street project actually does because of the number of units he's creating, but I understand people that are against it, but at the same time, okay, where are you going to do it? Where else can you do it? You're not going to just drop an apartment building on Market Street across from TPI. That just doesn't smell right to me. It doesn't look right. You want to create housing where people have access to amenities, where they can walk. If they're income restricted, they have access to public transportation. Otherwise, you're just.
Yeah, my only concern about someplace like Market Street up near TPI or in that area is that there may be some areas there that are appropriate for.
Potentially.
Yeah, and again, it's a matter of identifying those so people say, well, why didn't you look there? We did.
ELJ has an approved subdivision near New Industrial Commercial Way. They're going to do something, but Could you rethink that in new residential? Yeah, maybe yes, maybe no, but how attractive is that to people? And, are developers interested in that? And then if I live there as a residential, kind of multi-use development, I still have to get in my car to get to anything that I want to get to. You're not gonna build single family homes up there. When you're doing multifamily housing, you want to have amenities readily available to you.
Well, you got a bike lane if we're talking about Metacom. Would you see Metacom also becoming or Market rather becoming 3-lane? Yeah, you can
No, obviously,
create,
it's always gonna be 2 lane.
Yeah.
There's no way.
there's no way to,
Right, I mean, it's,
okay.
I mean, physically, it doesn't lend itself to,
Mm-hmm.
there are pockets, but again, the wetlands are.
Yeah, no, I know. I just, to say that there are other places, I'm thinking of a way of finessing it.
Yeah, no, I think the honest answer is there aren't.
Okay,
Let's just be honest. there
yeah,
aren't.
no, Andrea came up with some, and it was like, one of them was the Liberty Street School, which is not gonna be, it's not a,
Sorry. I sometimes down here at the end. I think it's more than, when you present the plan, it's the whole comprehensive view of it. And so, yes, people get hung up on the affordable housing because they just don't understand, but I think it's selling it as a huge amenity to the town in general, right? And so it's not just gonna impact or be benefit to the people who live there, but the rest of us who might want a Starbucks or another coffee shop closer to this side, or some clothing stores that aren't vintage. You know what I mean? I think there's just a lot of benefit to it, and want this walkable street that you can go and park and eat dinner and shop and do different things. Like, we don't have that anywhere in the East Bay. And so I think for the other residents, it's not just about housing, it's about the mixed use of it in the walkable streets and having a place to actually go and spend some time that's a little different than anywhere else around here.
To your point, I absolutely agree. I'm old enough for the centers, urban centers. I had a conversation last week with the reporter from Channel 12 that's looking at what we're doing. Have you ever gone to South County Commons? She goes, no, no, there's something. I said, well, what we could do at Metacom is something similar to what they've done there, but what they don't have there is all the residential around there and all of the density around there that's existing. And that's what we're trying to do, trying to create amenities, not just for new residents, but for existing residents. And it's hard for people to get their arms around envisioning what that is, but that's the opportunity. People like Garden City, we can create something like Garden City, but better. Here.
I have a question. I know we're jumping around, but we talked about beefing up the goals, and we talked about various things. Would there be like an idea of, hey, the purpose of this housing portion is to address, number one, the affordability crisis, number two, an environmental crisis. And the affordability crisis would talk about the 10% equation, it would talk about short-term rentals, it would talk into existing demographics, existing housing, new housing, and then the environmental crisis would talk about sea level rise, I don't know, transit-oriented development or something like that. But would that beef up the goals in a way of saying, hey, that's what we're getting after here up front? I mean, it already kind of says it, but
I think as an introduction, it's not important.
yeah, I think what we're talking about here is quality of life, and for existing residents. It speaks to what Ashley was saying, that's what we're looking for here. It's, what do we like about Warren? It's this eclectic place that has a variety of income levels. It has, it's a great place to live. It has environmentally, it has a variety of different things. So I don't necessarily want to put affordability one, environment second. It's people should be able to look at it and say what they're concerned about is preserving and enhancing a quality of life that brought us here in the first place. And that's within that umbrella, there are matters of affordability, of environmental concerns. I mean, the environmental concerns in some ways trump to me the affordability because that's a thing that we're under contention with, you know.
Yeah, I don't think that, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think you have to have an acknowledgement of affordability is critical to the future of this community. I mean, if the median, if $50,000 qualifies you to be low income, and the median income is 55,000.
Or 59.
You know, we need to make sure that we're providing opportunities. So I think we can address, we know the climate change things, regardless if we did anything on affordability, that's a problem.
But I guess that my problem is the term, because,
I hate.
and I think that's what I'm worried about, because they're saying 10% affordability, and I don't want to use their language in our
I think there's two
discussion.
things we can look at. I mean, I've started to use mixed, I used to use workforce housing, that offended people, so now I'm using mixed income
Yeah,
housing.
like that.
Great, that works.
But I also think, to your point, Fred, that we should be very bold in our statement that this 10% goal is just ridiculous. Whatever way we want to phrase that,
And we want to,
and unachievable.
Right.
Not just for us, but for anybody.
but our concern is our town, and, you know, we've got some issues that we have to deal with. So, again,
But I think,
I think
we
you've
can make a
gotten
statement
the
that,
points.
instead of meeting some artificial 10% goal, we are meeting the goals of those people in the community that, with respect to affordability, what we're doing with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, what the current rents are. I mean, we're not disregarding that it's an issue. We acknowledge it's an issue, but we don't want to be held to some level that we're going to make 10%.
I would say we're meeting the demands of the workforce in the East Bay. So if you're looking at what are workers making, what are they doing? They're working in service, they're working in manufacturers, they're working in the boat industry. They're not making, you don't have people who are working corporate jobs. So in order for us to sustain economically beyond housing, we need to ensure that we have an area that people can live and work, and we're supporting our.
And to me, those two
Here.
places are the new Medicom, but also downtown, preserving that. And the downtown area is much larger than just that historic district, but that's, we've got it, and it's not Central Falls, that's the other thing. I mean, this is kind of like a perfect mix. I think we can wave our flag high.
Throw some blue economy words in there and they'll love it.
Okay, look for those words coming.
We're supporting the blue economy of Rhode Island by building housing that the manufacturers who are creating.
To that point, a couple of things. I didn't highlight it enough here. I want to is that as through COVID, delivering meals to people, we have a high percentage of seniors that are aging in place in single family homes. So if we looked at, as part of the job lot plaza development, creating some, not assisted living, but senior housing that frees up single family homes for families to move in here. I mean, that's another win-win.
Well, I see a lot of people are moving to Tourister in just that way. Now, those are fairly wealthy folks.
Right,
who are
there
moving
are
there
people
just-
that, we delivered meals to these people. They don't have cars, they didn't have the ability to get to the drugstore or to the supermarket, but if we had those amenities close to them that they could walk to
Right.
in a village center, I mean, that's a model for, a responsible community looking at all of their residents, then also creating opportunities for people to move in with families. I know
Okay.
the primary is tomorrow, but I just need your votes.
Well, I mean, I guess our next step here is, I didn't mean to ignore the other stuff, but I think it's, it's to some degree, it's filler for the statewide planning. I mean, our focus needs to be is the goals and the priorities, and building in a strong, no nonsense case for it. Taking
So, I mean, this is a draft. I mean,
Yeah,
I would ask that between now and our regular scheduled meeting, I took notes in terms of some of the things you want to see, but feel free to blast me any additional statements or.
Do you think you're gonna, is your aim to get this for our next meeting? Because I mean, you don't have to do that. We could,
I want to get the comp plan done.
no, I know that.
And
And so, I mean, I'm totally comfortable having this on the agenda for the next meeting. Like,
How about
there's a lot of
Allison?
positive
Is
feedback.
Allison gonna be involved in this?
Yeah, because and this is my horrible attempt at format.
Okay.
I mean, I'll share this with her, I'm trying to
Would she
not
be
spend
at the
all of
next,
her money.
would she be at the next meeting?
I'll have her at the next.
Okay,
But I mean, again, I have limited resources.
no, I understand that. And well, as I'm trying to be fair to you, I don't wanna,
I'm fine, but I mean, I think that,
if it take another special meeting,
no, I think we can put this on the agenda for the
Okay.
next meeting. I mean, I think we got a lot of positive feedback tonight.
Yeah.
You know, if people have thoughts, share those with me. I'll redo this draft and we may not finalize it at the next meeting, but I want to make sure that we continue the conversation.
yeah, oh, for sure. Okay,
How many more elements after this?
Economic development, I think, is the only other one we're lacking, but we were there. And if we get through this, the economic development is going to be easy.
So who
Great.
writes the form-based code? When do we get the?
What's that?
So who writes the form-based code?
I've already written the form-based code, but we can't, the form-based code and zoning amendments have to be incorporated into the comprehensive plan for us to then bring those separately to the town council. So we've talked about it, we identify it, we say we're gonna do it, but it has to be, we've said enough about it to move it forward. But we have to get the form-based, the comprehensive plan.
anything else? Anyone?
Quick question, will there be, this is last question, under the existing residential areas, will there be any maps associated with
Yes,
this?
absolutely. And most of our, again, some of this is pulled from the land use.
Right, because
All
we,
of our residential zones are residential.
and we had talked about land use, flooding, because it's not just Market Street that's subject to that. That whole area along the Kickamuet is also, the low-lying areas are also subject to that as well. Great. Okay, nothing else? Call for an adjournment. Could I have a motion? Brett, a second. Ashley, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, turn your mics off. Thank you. Thank you.